So this whole endeavor, this process, um, can be confusing at times. It can seem like, what am I supposed to be focusing on? What am I supposed to be inquiring into? What is the practice? Is there a practice? Is it just a matter of surrender? It can even get more complicated when we talk about stages of realization and so forth. Um, but the beautiful thing about a retreat situation, or really any moment of meditation, is that regardless of what has unfolded for you, regardless of where you are in this process, in this processless process, all you're really called to do, no matter what is going on, no matter what the inquiry is, what the contemplation is, all you're really called to do is investigate the immediacy of this right now. Just this. That's it. There's really nothing more to this. How closely, how authentically can we recognize what is appearing here or what is perceived? This is what we're called to do, really. Now, there are ways of directing our attention in a subtly different way, depending on what we're working on, or what insights we've had, what shifts we've had. But really, all of those, whether it's a koan or a practice or an inquiry, are just subtle redirections of attention. It's kind of like saying, have you looked here? But here is always in your immediate experience. The answer to the koan is always the immediate experience, even before it becomes an experience. What the inquiry is pointing to is this, because there's nothing else it could point to. Natural meditation, shikantaza, is simple, authentic engagement in this, nothing more. So there's a radical simplicity to all of this that we engage when we talk about spirituality, awakening, all of it. And no matter where this retreat leads us, no matter where this investigation leads you, I would like to sort of offer that we keep a little bit of our recognition on this simple truth throughout, that we don't have to look somewhere else ever. We don't have to figure anything out. We don't have to try to gain an insight. We don't have to try to lose an identity. We don't have to change anything. It's not about that. The identified thought process is about that. It's about where I'm going, what I can get, what I want more and less of, and how to make that come about, which can only happen in the future, which I have to imagine into being. And I have nothing else to reference but memories. So I have to imagine those into apparent being. That's the world of thought, or the world of identified thought. But the beautiful thing about this process is we can let that rest. It's an activity that takes up so much of our attention, but it's not necessary, especially here. What we're doing, in one sense, is we're practicing being unguarded, being porous, raw, simple. There's a passage in the Bible, or it might have been in the Gospel of Thomas, or both, where Christ is talking to a group of followers, I assume, which are almost certainly grown men. And a child is trying to get through the crowd to see what the hubbub is about. And they're kind of keeping the child out. And Christ says, no, let the child in, let the child through. Until you learn to be like this child, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. That's a clear pointer. He's pointing to the innocence that is inherent to all of our existence. We all come through innocence, temporarily through time. But we also emerge from innocence now. It's already here, the innocence. What is innocence? What is it to be innocent? What is it to recognize our own innocence? I would argue it's probably 95% of what people actually want out of this process, out of realization. To live with innocence means there's nothing to solve. It means there is an acknowledgement that there never was anything to solve. And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with life. The identified mind would call that naive, uneducated, perhaps. But there's a way of living this innocence without negating knowledge, without negating experience. But the funny thing about that is the identified mind can't do that. It doesn't know how. It's trying, but it doesn't know how. But there is something here that does know how for every one of us. It knows the middle way. So then what is innocence? What is spontaneity? When we move with innocence, we move with spontaneity because there's no second guessing. The trust is inherent in living. We trust. We live, we move, all one thing. That's innocence. Another way of saying what innocence is to say that when we look closely at what we engage in the mind, when we're pushing and pulling on our thoughts, experiences, life, we're engaging in something, I don't want to say it's not innocent, but it's not completely authentic. Because what we're usually doing is we're dreaming up something to seek. And then we're kind of almost forgetting that we dreamed it up. We made it up. And then we seek it. And we convince ourselves that that's what we really want, that will make us happy, that will bring us back to innocence, bring us back to joy, bring us back to peace, natural enjoyment of life. But there's something in the background that's saying, no, it's not really like that. I've used the analogy of we have our own stick, and on the end of that stick is a string, and the end of that string is a carrot, And then we chase our own carrot around carrying our own stick, like we're ever going to catch that carrot. And if we do, we'll just tie something else to the end of the stick and chase that around. So really everything is innocent. But if there's something I could say that's seems to distract us from the natural innocence that's here all the time, it's that activity overcomplicating, convincing ourselves that there's something we need outside of this moment, that there's some set of conditions that if we were to achieve that set of conditions, if we were to make that happen, if we were to get that validation, that love, that recognition, health, if the world would just be the way we can imagine it could be, then finally we would be satisfied. But if we're really honest with ourselves, we realize even if that happens, we'll change the goal. We'll give ourselves something else to chase. It wasn't really that I wanted something else. So you see this in addictions of all types, right? Whether it's addiction to food, substances, drama, new stuff, shopping, exercising, we can usually find something in our life that's interesting enough to us to turn it into an addiction. And we usually know when we're kind of over that line, when we're just using it to distract ourselves rather than out of simple and spontaneous enjoyment. So when we see that distraction, which is an activity that we actually have to put energy into ongoing to keep it going, is really the only thing that seems to even obscure this that we're talking about, this simplicity, this innocence, this always here. The only thing we address in these retreats, just this, that only really distraction can seem to obscure it, and that we have to put energy ongoing to keep the distraction going of various kinds. Thought is the ultimate distraction, right? It's all one form or another of thought. So when we see this, then we realize something very simple and remarkable. It's what Ramana said. I believe he said it. I'm probably not the best about looking up sources to make sure I'm quoting everything correctly, but it's never wrong to do nothing. Doing nothing is never the wrong answer. And in a sense, that's what we're doing here. We're doing nothing. We're not distracting. We're just letting the distraction tendency rest. Let it fall away for one moment. How does that feel? Let it fall away for another moment. Not distracting, not running, not hiding, not constructing, not chasing or seeking. Everyone knows this. Everyone knows this place before knowledge, before learning, before cognition. It's right here for all of us all the time. So this business of realization, awakening, and all of it is really taking the backward step because we're acknowledging what's here all the time. It's difficult only in its simplicity. It's just letting go of grabbing, grasping, thought after thought, desire, aversion, all thought. So what is it right now to not grasp at any of it? It's something of an experiment as we proceed through round after round of meditation, not distracting, letting innocence return to us by not constructing anything, not running from this, however it is, whatever it is, however it feels. So it's almost an active trust at first, an act of surrender. But it opens us to a more natural, intuitive trust and surrender that's fully beyond us. So there's a bit of a participation, like an activation energy of participation. You have to have that willingness just long enough until you're sort of vibrating with the tuning fork of presence. And then a willingness to give over to the presence, to the vibration, to the sounds, to the silence, to the dynamism, to the absolute stillness, and to the place where thought cannot touch, because dynamism and stillness are not two. When we let that show us exactly how it is, exactly what it is now, things get very simple. This isn't a complicated deal. You don't need 50 or 100 books to teach you how to do this. You don't need a teacher to teach you how to do this. Let this teach you. Let the simplicity itself teach you. If the mind is just making too much noise about this, a simple question could be something like, what is innocence? And then release your need to grab onto a thought or belief or concept about that. Just let it drop in. If that resonates with you, it may not at all. What about, what is simplicity? What is the most simple right now? That can be a koan. It can be an entry point. What is so close that it can't be found? Do you see where that points? Sometimes it's just a matter of asking a few questions and seeing what drops you right in, what opens this to the mysterious, to the indescribable. The mind will ask questions like, is it this or is it that? Well, I kind of feel it. I kind of feel what you're talking about, but I'm not sure, is it this or is it that? Right? That's the thought. The thought says, I'm not sure. Let me think more about it. You can follow that thought train, or you can recognize that's a thought, but there's something here that's so innocent. It doesn't even have that concern. It doesn't need to ask questions because it just trusts. There's just trust here in the experience itself. So another simple pointer that can be helpful in retreat is to just realize you can get off the thought train at any stop, meaning the moment you recognize something as a thought, you're already off, really. often there's a safety mechanism, quote unquote, safety mechanism of the thought system itself to try to keep you there. And it says, oh, I recognize I'm thinking, oh no, now I'm thinking again. I must have done something wrong. What should I do? Blah, 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 blah. The moment you recognize, oh, this is one thought. I'm caught up in a thought that says, should it be this? Should it be that? Am I doing this right or that right? One doubt. The moment I recognize I'm caught up in it, I'm already disidentified. Now there's just presence here. That's it. There's no more. So the recognition that the moment we recognize a thought, we're already disidentified. We're already off the thought train. And we don't need to judge ourselves, beat ourselves up about it. Figure out what to do about it. Right? That's the sneakiness of the way our minds work sometimes. You can just remain right there. You might even sort of feel that thought substance subsiding or fluctuating, but no longer forming an identified construct, no longer forming something that we believe is happening, that's defining reality. And that's fine. Let that movement of consciousness be there. Let presence come forward, which isn't a thing. It's just this, as it is. Nothing's grabbing, holding, defining, constructing. Simplicity often can be investigated by coming closer, experientially closer to anything. So a simple analogy would be if you're looking at a projected movie on a screen and you're at a certain distance, it looks like formed people, figures, buildings, landscapes, to the degree that if you didn't know, you might actually believe it's really three-dimensional subjects on the screen. But if you get a little closer, it gets a little blurrier, maybe brighter, more light, perhaps. You still see variations in shades and shapes, but you might start to lose the boundaries, the clear boundaries between the faces and the backgrounds and so forth. If you move even closer, you start to notice that it's really all just made out of light. And the shades and variations at this closer distance are far subtler. They blend together much more smoothly and with less dramatic gradients. And then as you get very close, assuming you're not looking at your own shadow, but you get close enough to the screen to see the light striking the screen, it's all going to look almost like pure white light at some point. Now, this analogy works the best with thought. Once you sort of get how to do that. The first part of that, of course, is to disidentify, to recognize what it feels like to disidentify from a thought, as we kind of talked about a moment ago. But the moment you recognize, oh, there's one thought here. Sometimes even clarifying the thought helps to just remind yourself what you're actually thinking. Oh, okay, I was having some resistance reaction to an image or a memory of a conversation I had a few minutes ago because it didn't go the way I wanted or something. So you recognize, oh, there's like a thought that is sort of a recreation of a conversation. And then there's something that sort of says, no, I don't want that. Tries to move away from it. So once we recognize what the thought is, then we have an opportunity to move closer to the substance of thought. Again, when I say substance, I mean the light on the screen, not the subjects on the screen, not the story that, when clearly defined, the shapes are trying to portray, but what they're actually portrayed with, which is light. Similarly, we can do this with thought. It might be kind of wonky at first, especially if you tend to just create another thought to try to analyze. But if you're able to just hold on to one thought at a time, or slow down enough to just pay attention to, oh, there's a thought here. What the heck is it made out of? Can I get closer to that thought substance? And can I get closer? And can I get closer? You might find it's sort of fleeting, like as if it almost moves away as you move closer with your attention, with your exploration. But keep at it. Check it out. What if it moves in this direction? So follow it there. If it moves in that direction, follow it there. Get as close as you can, as if you want to actually grab a hold of the substance it's made out of. Like, is it made out of light? Is it made out of grains of sand or something? What's structuring those thoughts in the mind? So this moving toward this direct exploration of the nature of thought itself. It teaches you more than just, teaches you a lot, but one of the obvious things at first is that actually calms the thoughts down quite a bit. Second thing it teaches you is a thought is not nearly as formed a thing as we think it is. It's not nearly as concrete as we think it is. The third thing it teaches you is what makes thought uncomfortable largely is that we are resisting it, that we're believing it, and resistance and belief are closely associated. That's what makes thought uncomfortable. When we stop resisting it and we actually become interested in the substance itself, then it really changes the quality of our experience, the quality of this momentary exploration. So we realize all those things and more about it. And I don't want to give you the definition necessarily that stuff thought is made out of its consciousness, but probably anyone who's heard me before has heard me say it. So, but come up with your own instinctual recognition of what's going on in this space. What is all that made out of? And is it made out of something apart from the knowing of it, the recognition of it, that which is exploring this, which probably feels like you, probably feels like I. So where's the boundary there between whatever it is that feels like you, without naming it anything? Don't name it. You don't need to name it. Consciousness, awareness, I am. But there's something there that's looking around in this thought space, trying to get closer to whatever the substance is. Where's the dividing line between that which is observing, looking, intimately investigating, and that which it seems to be investigating? Is there a boundary? Is there a dividing line? You can learn so much this way in direct experience. It's amazing that we don't think to do this. It doesn't cross our mind usually to do this for many years as a thinking being, so strange as it is. But we definitely have the ability to. We absolutely have the capacity to do this, which is fascinating, and you can learn so much from it. So I would recommend anyone do this at any stage of realization, especially when your attention's naturally moving into that space. Again, like I made a video about this the other day. If there's just a lot of thoughts, so be it. Let's inhabit the thought space. Let's check it out. Don't try to force yourself out of it saying, I want to experience sound in a non-dual way because I know that's more real or something. There's time for that. But if your attention's just being pulled into consciousness, into thought, and so forth, again and again, explore it. It's fine. It becomes something quite interesting at some point. Almost like I always hesitate to describe this too much because I don't want anyone to like listen to the description and then compare it to their experience, because it's sort of antithetical to the act of looking itself at thought. But it just almost it's surprising how much it calms down typically if you're really at this, and it turns into something far more calm than the usual activity of mind. um, More vast, more, let's say, homogeneous, all inclusive. It becomes a moot point where you begin and where thought ends, and all of it, all of that stuff is just, you stop being concerned about it because it's all just that. It's all just this. So at any point, this is a wonderful practice, a wonderful way to investigate. Um, but again, it just comes back to this simplicity. Let's be simple as possible. We've believed all the movies on the screen, the narratives, the yada yada storylines. But have we looked at what it's actually made of? Have we looked at what our inner world is actually made of? Have we looked close enough to see, to intuitively know beyond all doubt? And then even once we have, it's just easier to do this. And it's more enjoyable, it's more natural and simpler. But we can still kind of forget to do it even after those shifts have happened. Um, we can still have some spiritual identity that is trying to do something a little more grandiose, but we can always return to this simple investigation of thought and consciousness, the space of being, the space of I. And it's just a matter of looking closer, seeing what's there before we labeled it anything, seeing what's there before we built something out of all those labels and constructed layers and layers of identity. And you can spend the entire retreat doing this, and it would be profoundly valuable. Again, it's so important to just recognize simplicity as um, a sort of pole star for this process. Now, the same application can be applied to sound. We just listen. Let the sound show us. By the way, if you have been sort of bathing in this consciousness, this conscious space, often when you start to investigate the senses, or you don't even have to start to, they often sort of bleed in, or you notice it's actually reasonably unnecessary or even sometimes impossible to really construct a boundary between consciousness and sound if you've been steeped in this consciousness. But regardless, one way or another, we might start to take in this simple and instinctual acknowledgement of sound, just as it is now. And we can come up with any inquiry based on this, or we can just allow the sound to be just as it is. However it is. We're not trying to tag it with qualities, describe it to ourselves. We're not planning on describing this to someone afterwards about what a cool mystical experience we had. It's just the sound. It might seem like it's moving. It might seem like it's still, changing, unchanging. All of those are just thoughts, evaluations. So there's just the sound, just the heard. If, again, we're compelled to move into the mind a lot, or the sound seems to be kind of broken up by a lot of thoughts, or we don't feel like we're able to rest simply and continuously in sound, then it can be helpful to ask a question, and there are several. You can come up with your own. Something like, what is sound? And it's as if you're investigating it in a direct way that can only be clarified through the direct experience of it. So when I say, what is sound? I'm not trying to encourage myself to imagine sound waves or describe to myself in a scientific way what sound is. I'm just reattuning attention to sound. What is sound? What if you've never heard sound and this is the first moment? You might be very interested in the immediate experience of it, far more than describing it to yourself. So what is sound? And you just sit with it. Closer. Similar to thoughts and consciousness, there's an ability to sort of get closer, although closer has less meaning in the sense gates. So if this is clear, you're able to remain just as the sound, without evaluations or contemplations. You can also ask, where is the sound? Now, we're also not looking for a mental image of a body space, an ear, part of the room. Those are thoughts, image thoughts. We're actually looking for the answer in the sound itself. So where is sound? We could also ask, where does sound end? Or does it end? This sometimes demonstrates there's no boundary between sound and anything else in the cloud of experience, whether it's consciousness or body sensations, visual experience. So where is sound? Now, we don't have a discrete or specific goal when asking this question. The experience is the answer. Of course, sound is the answer. However, you will usually notice some deepening, some more intimacy, inability to delineate where whatever the hearer of sound is and sound itself is or exists, the apparent dividing line. All of that just might not be anywhere in your experience, which is great. Might feel a bit more alive, radiant, luminous. But it doesn't have to. The key is that the sound remains. This is the kind of thing where when you first start doing it, contemplating in this way, it might feel slightly frustrating at times. It might feel like a fleeting experience or keep bouncing back into thoughts. But the more you do it, the clearer it gets, easier it gets, more intuitively natural and enjoyable it gets. If you're in that beginning phase where it's sometimes frustrating or your attention's bouncing a bit, it can be helpful to pick one sound in the field, whether it's a fan or air conditioning unit or a ring in the ear, some sound outside, an animal or waves or cars. Just pick one. Because often at the beginning, our attention is sort of trained to focus rather than be open. So we can attune to one part of the sound field. And you can ask all the same questions. What is sound? Where is sound? Where does sound end? And see if that discrete sound that we're holding our attention on is softening a bit, expanding a bit. This is surprisingly enjoyable once you sort of teach yourself to do this. From there, if you've developed the ability to stay with a single sound ongoing for a few minutes, you can see if it's possible to sort of invite in another sound, maybe a second sound in the environment. Try to sort of listen to both at the same time. And work with that for a while. You might notice there's an overlap. You can hear both, and you can also hear where they're not two. And you can see the logical conclusion of this. You can expand that out until you're sort of taking in the whole soundscape. But take your time with it, of course. There's no rush in any of this. You do it with your eyes open, eyes closed. See if it's different either way. when you're exploring where is sound, you might start to experience what is meant by the term non-dual, at least in certain aspects, because it's really pretty unlocatable once you recognize what a mental image is and what a sound is. That the mental image of your body, your head, your ear, the room, the object making the noise, you realize, okay, that's a mental image. And the sound is completely independent of that. The mental image is like an overlay. So now, how do I reference where sound is? It's definitely there, or something's there. There's an experience, but the location of it, it's not. Certainly, there's no sticky note on it somewhere saying it's here or there. What information am I experiencing in sound that tells me it's anywhere specific? This kind of contemplation, which is, again, it's listening closer, listening precisely, listening with enjoyment, with curiosity, with fascination, with innocence. Innocence is key here, though. We're not trying to do something to the sound. We're not trying to make that sound become non-dual. It's not like that. If that's what's happening, then there's definitely a lot of thought going on still. The sound is the teacher, has to be. Now, what we did in this talk was we started with a recognition of simplicity, innocence, and we applied it to thought, to a single thought. It can be a narrative thought, self-talk, or a belief that often isn't even recognized as a narrative until we slow down enough to ask, what are we reacting to? Then the belief starts to come into clarity, and we recognize, oh my gosh, that's a thought. So however we come upon a thought, or again, a visual image thought, imagining something that's not physically here. That's it. We've disidentified, and we have the opportunity to try to get a little closer experientially. And we, I think as a group, felt how calming that can be, how enjoyable. But hopefully you noticed it also, it sort of heightens alertness, but it's a relaxed alertness. It's not a tension. We're not getting sleepy or falling asleep. We might be, it can happen, but with this simple investigation of consciousness, of thought stuff, often there's an alertness that's even heightened. We don't feel dreamy or sleepy. We don't feel like our attention's coming and going, moving into halfway conscious thoughts, and then in the past and future. It's just right here, simple, calm. That's sort of an experience. As that deepens and the mind calms, the body calms, then it's very easy to apply the same thing to the senses. We did sound. You can do it with any sense. Okay, that's the talk for the morning. Looks like we are together again. There's a meditation at 3 p.m., 1500, excuse me. Q&A at 1550 or 3:50 p.m. is the next time we will see each other. So I'll get this talk uploaded as soon as I can.